Once upon a time, there was a young girl who wanted to buy an expensive toy.
Unfortunately, her family they couldn't afford any more new toys.
Fortunately, she was able to get a job after school.
Unfortunately, her sister found her stash of money that she was hiding.
This is Improv in Real Life. I'm Jude Treder-Wolff. In this podcast, we'll explore how improv can help us navigate the speed of life through conversations with experts who are wise, hilarious, and deeply human.
I'm in the basement of an administration building of a big not-for-profit company for which I offer health education classes for the employees because the organization wants their employees to make positive changes in their health. And of course, nobody wants to take these classes at work. So here's 30 people sitting in this room. It's not a great space. There's a gross little coffee machine in the corner, just cranking out weak coffee. It's early in the morning. And there's that awkward silence or murmur before something starts. People are trying to get a signal on their phones and they're complaining about it because they can't scroll on their phones. And I'm the outsider. I say, no, I don't work here. I'm sorry, I can't tell you how to log into your phone. In fact, you can't, but we're going to start now. And there's a feeling of dread. Every one of these classes is like this because nobody really wants to be there. They don't want their boss telling them how to live their lives. Understandable. And there's a PowerPoint that I'm not going to use. And so their eyes are on that board. But then I start telling them something that is a true thing that happened to me without any real introduction. Okay, so it's 1982. I'm driving in my 1974 Buick Apollo in New York City on St. Patrick's Day in rush hour in the pouring, pouring rain. So the way traffic is just like sludge moving down 9th Avenue toward the tunnel, where I'm going to my third of 3 jobs. And all I do, I'm in my car all the time because most of what I do is work and try to save up enough money to leave the East Coast and go back to Australia where I was living before I came here about a year ago. And my car is like my relationship. It's keeping me going. It's got a lot of miles on it, and it's always breaking down. But I was in love with this Australian guy, and for all the years before I moved there when I was still in college, going there and being with him was the big dream. It was the big objective. That will be my new start in life. And when I was living with him, we both realized that our relationship was amazing as long as we weren't actually together. And we were so crazy about each other, but when we were in the same space, it just didn't work. But now that I've been living out here on the East Coast, I'm thinking, it isn't that it didn't work. It's that we just didn't have enough time. It isn't that it didn't work. It's that I now have learned some things and I'm better. I'm a better person and I can be a better partner. So I'm just saving up money and he wants me to. He wants me to come back. He just wants me to go back there. And so I'm halfway through the Lincoln Tunnel in this horrible traffic and my car stops. I don't know what's going on, just stops. It's running. I get out of my car. All these people, New Yorkers in this terrible traffic, they're screaming at me, they're giving me the finger, and I'm saying, it won't go. I don't know why. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Nobody cares. Then I hear this weird voice, this robotic, return to your vehicle, return to your vehicle. And I turn, and from the Jersey side, there's this little device, like a little mini submarine that's coming down the side of the tunnel from the Jersey side with a man in it instructing me to return to my vehicle. It tows my car out to the mouth of the tunnel on the Jersey side, drops my car off, and they hand me a stack of yellow pages. And I have $7 in cash. I have a checkbook that maybe I have $150 in the account. And that's it. I don't really have anyone that I can call because I haven't made relationships with people because I'm not staying here. I don't know anybody that could come out on a night like this. But meanwhile, I'm calling, using the Yellow Pages, I'm calling shops or towing services in West Orange, New Jersey, and they don't answer because they're closed. They answer and they say, it's St. Patrick's Day, we're partying. They answer and they say they don't take checks. So about 40 minutes go by and my hysteria is starting to really escalate. And I see this garage that's not that very far from my apartment. He answers. Tell him the situation. He says, look, we're done. We're closed for the night. And I know I have to do something. So I freak out and I beg. I'm like, you can't leave me here. You don't understand. I've only lived out here a year. I don't know anybody well enough to call and come and get me. You just can't leave me here. And he says, okay, all right. I'll come get you. Just wait for me. There's a pause and I say, do you take checks? Pause. And I know I have to do something to get him to say yes. And I say, the check is good. I promise you, it's good. It's just I don't have a credit card or anything yet, but I will. And and he said, don't worry, lady. I won't leave you stranded. I'll come get you. 30 minutes later, out of the fog and the rain comes an angel in the cab of this massive towing vehicle that sort of breaks through the darkness. And this guy's grinning at me from up there, tells me to hop in the cab of the truck. And he is such a nice guy. And he's saying, what a night, what a terrible night for you to be stuck. And I say, oh, you really saved me. Thank you so much. He drops me in front of my apartment in West Orange. He says, look, I'll go figure out what's wrong with the car. I'll get back to you. But you're home, you're dry, you're safe. And I go to pay him and I write him the check and I give him my ID and he looks at it and he says, I can't take this. I'm thinking to myself, wow, he really is a nice guy. He's not even going to charge me. And then he says, I don't get it. You have an Apple Bank and you have a New Jersey address and you have a Wisconsin driver's license? And my stomach drops. I'm from Wisconsin. I just never bothered to change my driver's license to the state that I actually live in. And I'm stunned. And I know I have to do something to get him to take that check. So I start crying again. And I'm like, no, really, the check is good. I've been so busy. I just haven't taken care of that detail. But you can keep the car until the check clears. And he says, okay, all right, we'll deal with it. And I go in and I think, wow, he's a saint. And a half hour later, he calls me and says, I got your car back up and running. It was out of transmission fluid. So next step is you have to take it in somewhere and figure out why that happened. But, you're back. So Monday morning, I'm at the DMV applying for a driver's license. And the lady's so helpful. She says, you have to surrender your Wisconsin driver's license. You're not allowed to have a license from 2 different states in the United States. And I'm thinking, surrender? Like feels like such a big word for a very minor thing. All right, I'll surrender my Wisconsin driver's license, DMV lady. And as I slide that license under the glass that separates us, I feel waves and waves of grief. And it occurs to me for the first time that this is my life now. My relationship, I'm never going back to Australia. I'm never going back to Wisconsin. I'm here now. And this life that I chose to live on the East Coast is lonelier and tougher and much more challenging emotionally, financially, every way than I ever imagined it would be. And I've had these defenses up and I never really faced how this feels and that I really do have to surrender my past to live here now. And that day I go to AAA and I apply for a Visa card and I start thinking, I know this relationship is over. And if I do start dating again, maybe I should start dating a mechanic. Now, I tell this story to these people in this room, as I do most of the groups that I work with that involve big change. And most of what we're talking about something as simple as changing your diet or taking up something that you should be doing to feel healthier. It can change all of your relationships. It can change your sense of yourself. It can bring up shame. It can bring up embarrassment. And we won't even know what those feelings are until we start to do the thing. Just like I didn't feel any of this grief until I let go of that license. And I didn't even know that's what was holding me back. When I tell this story, I don't have to explain to the people there why I'm telling it to them. They get it. And then everybody would talk about how hard change really is and that things come up that are unknown in the new life that you create for yourself or trying to create. Even if it's a change you want, there can be stresses that you cannot imagine from when you start. The story does the work. The story brought us together. It levels everything. I'm a human being. They're a human being. I'm not telling you what to do with your life, but let's talk about what it feels like to make change. I've always used stories this way. So I love this conversation that I had with Kenn Adams in this episode. He's from the Synergy Theater. He is a storytelling master. He's the creator of the Story Spine. He's going to talk about why stories matter, how to construct them. And I think you're going to love listening to his life experience and his wisdom. If you enjoy stories like this, head over to Spotify and check out Funny Story with Jude Treder-Wolff. They're true stories from my life, often told live on stage. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is brought to you by LifeStage. LifeStage provides opportunities for people to gain skills and knowledge for navigating today's uncertain world. The capacity for creativity, connection to new ideas and other people, collaboration, and community building. For more information, visit lifestage.me.
I am so excited about my guest today, coming to us from Walnut Creek, California. The Synergy Theater does something that is very unique, even in the improv world, full-length improvised plays. He's an expert in storytelling. Welcome to the podcast, Kenn Adams.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be here, Jude.
I just want to start by talking about some of the improvised shows that you're doing, and then we'll talk about storytelling, which is our theme for today. But I see you have improvised Stephen King, improvised Clue, improvised Dungeons and Dragons. Let's just talk a little bit about how that plays and how you came up with it. It's very fun. Can you just talk about those shows and anything you want to say about those stories that you tell through those themes, like those genres?
Yeah, so that's what Synergy Theater does. We perform full-length improvised plays in a whole variety of different genres, and we're always experimenting with new ones. And it's all based on this approach that I've developed to dramatic structure. How can we understand how plays work? How do they go about telling a good story with a beginning that leads to the middle that results in the end? So we understand that together. We learn and practice that. And then it's just a matter of shaping the story in order to be appropriate for the genre. So when we were just doing Stephen King, it's a horror genre, and there's supernatural elements, and there's often one character who has some psychological trauma that they have to deal with by facing the haunting, which becomes a symbol for that trauma. And by defeating the haunting entity, they are working through their psychological growth in order to get onto their next stage of development. So we look at the genres that we're working in, we study them, we figure out what makes them unique, how are those stories told. And then we practice taking our approach to storytelling, which is universal regardless of drama, and just applying it to those types of characters and in those types of situations.
I love this, and I'm very excited because you're the originator of a technique or form called the story spine that is familiar to some people and maybe an entirely new concept to many. And we're going to talk about that exact, would you call that what would you call that?
Yeah, I just call it a tool. It's a very brief tool that we can use to help learn and teach storytelling.
And you're going to take me through that tool in just a minute because I want to actually experience that with you and with the people that are listening. But I wanted it's a tiny little sidebar, but I was doing a workshop on curiosity, and there are three types of curiosity. There's playful, adventuresome curiosity. There's morbid curiosity, where people think about like the worst things that could happen, what could happen, and then what could happen, and then what could happen. And there's suspicious curiosity. There was a wonderful study that I read that morbid curiosity, which I think if you did a Stephen King story, is about, like when you said psychological horror, psychological trauma, that people who have that kind of curiosity are more resilient in real trauma because they're used to thinking about all these things. So there's a real benefit to spinning out a tale, I think, that is a fantasy, but it can be a negative fantasy or a scary fantasy, and then taking that wherever it goes and practicing it, really playing with it. There's real benefits to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think at the heart of these horror stories, there is always a mystery of some sort or another. Who is doing the haunting? Why is that place haunted? What is their grievance? And that type of morbid curiosity that the characters need in order to pursue that further rather than just run away and give up is the same type of work we need to do in life to allow us to approach our own traumas that's behind those doors we're afraid to open and confront them, and by getting past them, being able to grow.
That was a beautiful encapsulation of the value of this kind of experience, this creative experience. And those genres are just so interesting, all of that. And then when you put it in a genre, that also makes it a safe space too. It's like you're creating a structure that is a familiar structure for people.
Right. Yes, and also one of the things, now not always, of course, but what often happens is that the main character in those stories who does have the courage to face the haunting and somehow defeat the ghost, they are rewarded with some sense of happy ending. And so that gives you the sense, the faith that if you just have the courage to face your dark places, there is a brighter spot waiting for you.
Yes. Face the dark spaces and something will be revealed in you. It could be a strength you didn't know you had.
Exactly.
It could be, yeah. I mean, you could give birth to a part of yourself just by facing those dark realities and spaces. And that is a very fulfilling idea. So I love that we could get right into like an application of this, because the
Mhm.
performance piece is amazing. And I think it's so inspiring to watch improv in any case, but to watch a full length story unfold in front of you in real time. It's a stunning thing to see that, and to see that people are trained to be able to go to the next stage of a story and to know how to do that. So I thought maybe what we would start with, you could take me through a story spine, like teach me how to do a story spine in an improvised way. And then we'll talk about that. I mean, you already named some applications of it, and then we can just debrief it a bit and talk more
Yeah.
about storytelling as something that is so valuable in people's lives, both creating stories in real time and then telling stories about things that have already happened using the story spine. We could do that.
Yeah. Well, the story spine is just a very simple tool that takes the basic structure of a story with a beginning and a middle and an end, and it boils it down to its most concentrated form. So it's an 8-line structure, and the first half of each sentence is written, and the second half is improvised. So the story spine is like this: once upon a time, every day, but one day, because of that, because of that, because of that, until finally, and ever since then. So if you and I were to do that together, I don't know if you can write that down or have that nearby, but that is the little script that we go through, or I could just prompt you through it if you
How about
like.
if you prompt me, since this is an audible form,
Yeah, okay.
prompt me through it, and I'm really just going to go with an idea that
Right.
comes to me and not plan it.
Right. So I'll go first, and then I'll just say the first part of your sentences, and you complete the sentence, and then I'll do my part. And we're just going to go back and forth. So, for example, once upon a time, there was a zookeeper who loved her job at the zoo. Now, your turn, and you say every day.
And every day, the zookeeper would get an oat milk latte on their way to work.
But one day, there was no more oat milk, and she couldn't have her latte because of that.
And because of that, she went to a new coffee shop that she had never been to before.
Because of that, she was late for work.
And because of that, she got called in to the office for the first time ever.
Until finally she was fired from her job. And ever since then.
And ever since then, she has had an animal sanctuary of her own in her backyard, starting with a baby squirrel. I know that's too much information.
That was absolutely perfect. Yeah. So there it is. And that's how we practice. Now, when Synergy Theater teaches improvisation, we teach what I call the 3 rules of improvisation, which are be spontaneous, make your partner look good, and build on your partner's idea. And as we practice with Story Spine, the goal is to allow it to become more and more spontaneous, more and more give and take, so that it's less of a thoughtful exercise and more of a spontaneous manifestation of this energy between the 2 improvisers, so that the story structure, that beginning, middle, and an end, becomes habitual, becomes organic to the storyteller, and expresses itself naturally when we're improvising spontaneously.
So when you're teaching this, it starts with 2 people going back and forth like you and I did, or would you do this more in a group where everybody, like it could be a group of 5 people and each person knows, and they know the spine, they know the beats, if you will?
Yeah, it could be used in any way you like. It could be done as an individual exercise. You could do it in a group and everybody goes around and takes one turn. You could do it back and forth. The story spine is the story spine, and you can explore it and have fun with it any way you like to.
So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to talk about the performance of this when it becomes a full-length play. But before we get into that, I just want to make this note about real-life application of the story spine that I have used with clients who have lived through a trauma. It could be a Stephen King level event, something they never thought they would go through. Even the pandemic for some people was something that was so mind-blowing. Losses that happened, just the world shutting down, but then there's all different kinds of and one day kind of moments in people's lives. And having this the idea that I was this person, to define it, write out like a paragraph. I was, once upon a time, there was a person who had every intention of starting their own business or whatever it might be. And then one day, which is this inciting incident, and that would be the traumatic event, happened. And because of that, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and I became a different person. So that spine in improv, people are developing it in real time, an idea or a character or a story. And it also is a wonderful way for people to organize their own experiences that they've already had and see that they have been changed by life. And sometimes that change is painful. Often it's a trauma. It's something had to be let go of. And at the same time, there's a person who's telling that story that is healing. And they're using that spine and that idea to be part of that healing, to tell that story as something that I got through and I'm getting through. And that then becomes beneficial to other people too in their own life. So It's really a beautiful tool for many different purposes in real life, as well as creating, as you said.
Absolutely. I think there's a number of applications that you touched on there. So one is this sense of setting intentions towards personal growth and manifestation. That's what stories are all about. It's about watching a character start in one place in life, have an experience, grow, develop, and end up in a different place in life, hopefully a better place in life, or if it's a cautionary tale, in a worse place in life. But then we learn that, in fact, they should have done the opposite, and so too can we. So you can do that for yourself. You can use the story spine in order to create your own story, almost like a mantra, in order to very purposefully set your intentions and your very concrete steps you can take in order to achieve them, in order to give yourself this roadmap to follow as you are on your journey of self-discovery and growth.
Yes. And I want to share something from my own life that just occurred to me. It's just something that, a reminder of something that I shared with a group that I was working with. I used to do this workplace wellness program. I did it for 10 years. So I had to create lots of different kinds of experiences and classes for this workforce. It was a healthcare workforce. And when I got into storytelling, and we brought improv into it also, but I would have to tell my own stories in order to get people on board with the idea. And there was, especially it was about health behavior. It was encouraging people to treat their health, their bodies better, to take better care of themselves. So I'm going to try to do this really succinctly using the story spine. But I was told by my doctor that I had to take a statin drug. So one day there was a woman who didn't need a statin drug, had never dreamed of that being part of her life. She's healthy. And her doctor says, your cholesterol numbers are way out of range. It's medical malpractice if you don't start taking this medication. And I say, I'm not taking that medication. I can do it. I can get these numbers. I'll work harder. So because I got this information from her, I doubled my workouts. I lowered my stress in any way that I possibly could. I started meditating. I took sugar completely out of my diet. It was already out pretty much, but now I really became very strict about it because I read something about that maybe there was a conversion of some kind of sugar into cholesterol. And 6 months go by and my numbers were worse. And so I said, I can do it. I can do it. And I added taking some natural supplement. I did even another kind of exercise, another mile of walking. 6 months later, my numbers were where they were. They were very stubbornly bad. And I'm so upset. Now I've lost about 30 pounds. That was okay. And she says, I said, everything I'm doing, I would be so skinny 25 years ago. I would be so skinny and I wouldn't have any of these problems. And she said, that's right. Things change. And I realized this whole thing is just about being older. This whole idea, I don't want to take this medicine, is about one thing. It's about being older. And I have not accepted that I am older. And I took the prescription and I filled it. And I've been taking the medication now for, I don't even want to tell you how many years, but it really wasn't about not doing enough, but I was a different person at the end. I was a person who was more accepting that now I'm older and things are different. It's not easy to accept that.
Well, you made me think of something interesting. We often talk about using the story spine in a forward moving direction in order to set intentions and help manifest the new self. But it can also be used very powerfully to help analyze past decisions and past behavior. So you find yourself caught in a rut, your career stalled, or your relationships are continuously breaking down. What is it about the rut you're in that you are in denial of, that you're not seeing? You can use the story spine to create stories about you in the past to help discover what patterns you're in that are not giving you the and ever since then that you're looking for, so that you can understand yourself and have more of a clear eye towards where you need to go.
Exactly. And that is a healing power of storytelling. I think that when people have gone through, this was an example of just a blind spot of my own that I loved sharing with people, because a lot of times why we don't change is just it is a blind spot, and we need to review our own behavior and our own internal chart of what's our thinking. And I like to make comedy out of it. I know other people, like in these classes, they loved hearing about somebody else just being stuck, because it makes you feel like more human.
Yeah. Something else is if you use the story spine, let's say you're evaluating your own behavior. So you're writing a story about you, but in the story spine, you have the privilege of casting it in the third person, right? You can write a story. There was once a woman who, and of course we understand, and you understand you're talking about yourself, but just that one level of separation of writing a story about a character allows you to have some objectivity to your own situation that you couldn't have otherwise. It's like a layer of separation that allows you to see your life as a story and imbue it with all of your emotions and truth, but through the safety of that fictional element.
Well, that is a very true thing that you're saying. And there's science to back up what you're saying, that when people tell something from the third person, a story from the third person, they have more compassion for that person. That's something that I find so interesting about using the arts in healing. So you just labeled it that when we describe something from this third person, we have more compassion for that person. And then in the therapeutic process, you can bring yourself around and say, oh, I am that person. If that's me, I can have more compassion for myself if I could have compassion for that character. So it's a wonderful practice. And we have all these tools that are at our disposal to examine our lives, ourselves, and understand our own thinking. I could not, if I didn't have that story about the statin drug, I would have told you I'm really good at change. I'm great. I like change. Well, not always. There are times I'm very stubborn about it. And I just had a blind spot about that. So the story idea can reveal things.
Absolutely.
And then we can have more compassion for ourselves.
Right. And this is why, of course, we are so addicted to stories. This is why we read and watch TV and movies. This is why we love listening to stories from the time we're infants, is because it is a constant way of processing our life, of processing our emotions, of processing our psychological fixations and understanding them, and helping us set models for ourselves that we can follow in order to help grow and develop.
Absolutely. And the storytelling goes back to people sitting around a fire, strategizing how everybody was going to survive. And now we're using it in this wonderful healing way. So let's talk a little bit about something that not everybody's going to do, but I think it's a fascinating idea if you want to share about it. So taking those beats of the story, if you will, or the different elements that build out the beginning, middle, and end of a story, how do you help your improvisers flesh that out into a full hour of play?
Yes, and it's not contained or restricted to an hour of time. A story is a story. So when we improvise full-length plays at Synergy Theater, we improvise a 2-hour play with an hour act and then an intermission, and they could be as long as you like. But the answer to the question is it all has to do with understanding the basic concept of beginning, middle, and end, and how stories move from one of those locations to the other, and what happens when you're there. So if you look at the story spine as the basic model, once upon a time and every day, that's the beginning. And what happens in the beginning of the story is we build the routine by which the characters are living when the story begins. So we learn who the characters are, where they are, the setting, the time. We learn what is going on at the moment. So for example, In Romeo and Juliet, all of this has to do with there are two families who are at feud with each other. There's a young boy named Romeo who's lovesick because Rosalind doesn't love him back. And every time they meet the other family in the street, they fight. They get into a fight. The prince comes along and tells them that if anyone fights again, you're going to be sentenced to death or banished. So it's very active, and there's a street brawl, but nonetheless, that is the routine that is underway. Then what happens when we go from the beginning to the middle? We have to break the routine. So we purposefully set up a strong routine in the beginning so that we can break it with what, in my model of play structure, I call the first significant event. I have a book called How to Improvise a Full-Length Play, The Art of Spontaneous Theater. The story spine is in there, and the story spine misses one or two steps that a full-length play requires. So the book starts with the story spine, but then extrapolates it further. So some of the terminology I'm using right now isn't right in the story spine, but nonetheless, it's in this understanding of how plays are constructed. So how do we break the routine in Romeo and Juliet? Romeo meets Juliet. For the first time, somebody from one side of the feud meets the other, someone from the other side of the feud, but rather than hating each other, they love each other. So that's the but one day. Now we're in the middle of the play. Okay, so now we've broken the routine. What happens in the middle of the play? Because of that, because of that, because of that. We raise the stakes based on the first significant event, based on breaking the routine. We get the characters in trouble, either emotional trouble or physical trouble, but we increase the risk that they're facing until the audience is wondering, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to these main characters? Are they going to succeed or are they going to fail? And then it's time to go from the middle into the ending. And we do that through the until finally offer, or what we call the dramatic climax. And the climax is an action that the main character takes in the play that sets them on the path towards success or failure. So that's how we do it. We gain a real intrinsic understanding of story structure about how to create what I call the foundation, the beginning of the play, where we're establishing the routine, how to break that routine, how to raise the stakes of it having been broken, how to set the character on a course towards success or failure, and then how to follow through with that until finally they either do succeed or fail. We learn that. We practice it with tools such as the story spine. Then the next step is to do it up on our feet. So now we're playing characters and we're improvising scenes. There's a whole bunch of other skills, acting skills and improvisation skills that one needs in order to do that. But what we're doing is basically having one part of our mind on sensing where we are in the story. Are we still building the routine? Did we break the routine? If we did break the routine, what are the consequences of having broken that? And how can we make offers that raise the stakes of that? And by observing where we are and tending to it appropriately, we take ourselves from the beginning to the middle to the end. Improvisation is all about focusing on your partner, figuring out what your partner needs to be successful, and then building on those offers in order to help them succeed. We like to think of the story of the play itself as a partner. And the play itself is making offers that it needs. And it's our job not just to listen to each other and accept each other's offers, but to listen to the play. What is the story that is growing organically around you? And how can you make the right offer in order to give it what it needs? Does it need more foundation? Is it time to break the foundation? If the routine in the foundation broke, what the play needs now is a stake-raising offer in order to get the character in trouble for having broken that. Like in our little story spine, okay, if the story tells us that she didn't get her coffee that day, well, now it's my job to make the story look good by causing a dire consequence of her not having had it. If we're not focusing on the story, then we might be at risk of making offers that are more at home, in the beginning, because we haven't sensed that we've moved on.
Do you do the story spine out in the world as in an applied setting ever?
Yes, absolutely. So applied improvisation, this concept of taking the skills of improvisation, be spontaneous, make your partner look good, build on your partner's ideas, and all of the other related tools, and applying those not to performance improvisation, but to professional relationships, personal growth. Yes, we do that all the time. And the story spine is a very powerful tool because, like we've already spoken about, it can be used to help set intentions, personal intentions, so that you can manifest the person you are trying to become. In order to create anything, we must imagine it first, right? So you can go back and watch Star Trek from 30 years ago and say, oh my goodness, we have a lot of those things that they imagine, right? So someone has to imagine it and put it out into the world in imagination form before it can be built. And so too must we do that with ourselves. So if there are certain habits you want to build, or certain career levels you want to achieve, or personal relationships that you want to improve, you need to imagine what it is where you want to go, and then you need to imagine the steps you can take in order to get there. The story spine allows you to do that. So you can use it as a very concise tool. Once upon a time, write it out and set a personal vision for yourself that you can then put concrete steps towards realize.
Well, that's a fascinating idea. So I wonder if we could play a game that I use with people when I teach. I teach a different kind of storytelling. I teach people to tell their true stories of things that have already occurred. So I want to do this game with you, and then we'll chat about this as a piece. So it's called Fortunately, Unfortunately. The purpose of the game is to very quickly go from things are working to things are not working, and just take a character through things are working, then things are not working. And then we can just talk about how that applies to like real true storytelling about real things in life. So it's a once upon a time, once there was a blank, and then there's a statement of fortunately, and the next person has to say, well, unfortunately, and with just there's two of us. So one of us is going to get fortunately, and the other one's going to get all the unfortunately. So it won't go very long, but it's just the idea that I'll let you create a once upon a time character, and then we'll just do a few beats like this.
Once upon a time, there was a young girl who wanted to buy an expensive toy.
Unfortunately, her family said they had a very limited budget. No more new toys. They couldn't afford any more new toys.
Fortunately, she was able to get a job after school to earn the money herself.
Unfortunately, her mom needed the money for some bills.
Fortunately, she was able to secret just a little bit away.
Unfortunately, her sister found her stash of money that she was hiding.
Fortunately, she was able to keep it in a locked box.
Unfortunately, the locked box key fell down in a well.
Fortunately, she was a very agile cliff repeller.
Unfortunately, while she was down in the well, somebody said, "What are you doing down there?"
Fortunately, it was her guardian angel.
And I'm going to end the story on her guardian angel rescuing her. Because we could just keep going on and on. Okay, so when I teach storytelling, when I teach people to tell their true stories of things that have already happened, we do that exercise around the circle. And there's usually 6 or 7 people, so people don't have to do the same side of it. And we'll just take this character through some random, like we did, so some random events. And then we'll take a true thing that happened, maybe that we all know about. Could be a national event. Could be something that we all are familiar with that's in the news, or something, or it could be a Seinfeld episode, something that we all know, that we're all familiar with, and do the same game and realize that all good stories have this character who wants something, because you started with she wants this new toy, which takes her on this journey that involves a lot of adversity. And then her skills and her resilience at each of those, and then maybe a mentor, finding out she has a guardian angel, which is like a hero's journey kind of moment. Her sister's her tormentor, doesn't want to help her out. And then maybe the angel, I would say, if we leave it on the angel, we assume she gets out of the well and the angel helps her, like a fairy godmother type of person. Amazing. In doing that exercise that way, what I want people to achieve, and it does work really well, is to realize that all stories, if they're interesting, they're going to have that back and forth. They're going to have, this happened, it didn't go so well for me, so I did this. That was all I knew how to do, so that didn't go so well. And then climb out of that well, or be lifted out of that well by some force that is greater than us, that leads to transformation. And it does help to normalize adversity. That I worked a lot. I did a big program with a cancer center out here on Long Island. And everybody there in the group, of course, was a cancer survivor. Some of them were still very sick. And it was such a fascinating set of stories of real things that had happened in their lives that had nothing to do with cancer. What they loved telling stories about were real things that they had achieved and accomplished in their lives. And they got to know things about each other that had nothing to do with cancer. It had to do with their character, their development as a person. And it was a very powerful thing. And to realize all these dimensions to a person through their telling of their story. And Story Spine, to your credit, I'm saying to you, was part of their experience through you.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yes. So those beats, and my take on it with them was, be sure you include all the adversity so that we understand the stakes of this character that you became. And that was that I think sometimes people want to gloss over the hard parts and just either talk about the triumph, but it's not an earned triumph to the listener.
I think you tapped on two very important things there. One is this concept that there will be adversity in life, and stories are all about that. Stories are about characters having objectives, the thing they want, and facing obstacles, the things preventing them from getting what they want. And so they must play different tactics, different ways of trying to get what they want by going through, around, or over, or destroying the obstacle. So again, by telling stories and by consuming stories, we are nourished with this understanding that you can do it. If there is an obstacle, you can find the strength and the resources and the inner wisdom to find a tactic to somehow confront and conquer that obstacle. And even if that proves not to be true, the story is giving you some sense of hope, some sense of faith that if you try, you can succeed. And at least that gives you the fuel to keep trying.
Yes. And the heroes of stories aren't really heroes unless they struggle. And our own stories, we might think our struggle is some kind of, often as a therapist, I'm just going to just drop in things that, because of things that people say to me or have said, over the years, is that they think the struggle is a negative thing or maybe a shade on themselves, like a shadow on themselves. When in reality, as you're saying, all stories involve struggle because all human experiences involve struggle. And if we didn't have struggle, what would be, there really actually wouldn't be a triumph at all. And it's really wonderful to share struggle so that other people can say, oh, wow, now I see this is something that people can get through. Maybe I can get some energy from that, or at least feel understood.
Yes, absolutely. It's like the myth of Sisyphus by Camus. Sisyphus in ancient Greek mythology was a mythological king, and he was punished by the gods because he offended Zeus. And his punishment was to spend eternity rolling this incredibly heavy boulder up to the top of a hill. But just before he would get to the top, it would roll back down, and he was doomed to repeat this for eternity, never reaching that goal. And so the official takeaway is that that is his damnation, his punishment. But then in the 40s, Albert Camus, the philosopher, wrote an essay on this that he called The Myth of Sisyphus. And he reinterpreted that to help us understand that, in fact, Sisyphus should be seen as having been rewarded. He should be considered happy because he is in his process. And even though he will never reach that goal by getting the boulder to the top of the hill, the goal is meaningless. It's the process that's important, and he has nothing but process.
I love that idea about that story because we often do interpret it as, oh, poor Sisyphus, over and over and over again. And look at all of us. We have to keep repeating the same lessons. But that reframe is really wonderful. It's the whole point, is to just practice and practice and practice and experience it.
Yeah, and it just taps into the whole improvisational philosophy of staying in the present, of not projecting into the future or worrying about what will happen if we don't get to someplace, but rather just enjoying where we are and gaining whatever benefit we can from the process, even if that process proves to be a struggle.
And what you're saying is also an improv. I find that in the applied improv world, when I'm teaching people how to do it, like you're teaching skills for how to improvise, it isn't the outcome, it's the muscles that you're building through this process. That's the whole thing. That's the whole purpose. And sometimes stories, we have a hope or a want. So when you talk about the idea of manifestation or what somebody's aiming at, Sometimes that aim does not happen, but we end up on a different plane and a transformative event happens because we went for that, because we tried. We now are, maybe we just end up on a different road. And it's not the one we planned for, but it's a different one and it's fine. Or it's a revelation.
Well, this is a very important concept in improvisation, of course. So improvisation is one way of creating a story. You can also sit down and write a story. Yeah, there are different ways of making your story. One of the things that I love so dearly about improvisation is that concept that you just touched on, which is that there is no one correct ending to a story. Once again, it's about seeing what the story wants. And part of the joy of improvisation is watching it grow and develop into something that is outside of your control, often because you're doing it with 3, 4, 5 other people and they're contributing too. And the whole point is, can we build something together and wonderful that we never would have built on our own? And if it goes in a different direction than you had anticipated, that is a feature, not a bug. That's what we're hoping for, because that allows for innovation and personal growth in directions that you never would have anticipated for yourself. So you could be putting yourself in a cage if you have a very strong idea, I must be this by the time I'm 36, or I'm a failure. I must be this, or if I'm not on Broadway, if I haven't published my first book, or if I'm not married, I'm a failure, only to discover that there are so many other stories out there for you that might suit you better if you were only open to them. So seeing each obstacle not as a punishment, but as an opportunity.
And in addition to what you're saying, but to seeing these developments of what a character that is in your scene, if you're learning to improvise, does something that you have to react to, that you didn't anticipate, and allowing yourself to just let go of the story where you thought this was going, let it go. And now this will be more fun, more interesting, and you're rolling with it. That set of skills is even more important.
Well, I'm just going to say, isn't that so important in life? As a therapist, right? People hold on to things way past the point that they're a benefit for them. Even if there was a justifiable reason for holding on to that caution, or holding on to that grudge, or holding on to that job, even if at some point that was helpful to you, you lose sight of the fact that 5 years have gone by, 6 years have gone by, the world has changed, the people in your sphere have changed. That thing you're holding from 5 years ago is not helping you anymore, but it's such a habit that you're not even aware you're holding it anymore. So improvisation, this concept of being spontaneous, of being in the moment, of really being aware of what's happening, not regretting or resenting what did happen or being anxious about what might happen, but just being aware of what is happening, is so important, because that allows you a fresh perspective from which to spring off in different directions.
100%. And the psychological muscle that I think improv is more effective in some ways than a lot of therapeutic techniques. It is a therapeutic technique in itself, the experience of navigating the unknown and the unfamiliar and playing with it in all the ways you're saying yes to the thing that is showing up. And then reflecting on that and saying, how much do I do that in my life? Like you're saying, how much do I say yes to the new idea or the new path that's in front of me? Or is it just so scary that I don't know myself? And I think improv is something that we can meet people right in that gap between what's happening now and what I'm familiar with and what I know, what I think I know, who I think I am, and this new reality that's already opened up. Maybe your job is changing. Maybe somebody died. Your kids have gone away to college and you've got 30 more years to live. And that identity that has served so well, or sometimes an identity that has not served us well, but we still just feel safe in it. Improv can help us right in that gap because we're just practicing saying yes to something without knowing how it's going to turn out.
And something that you learn doing that is that the failure you might experience is often not as bad as you fear it was going to be. You take a risk, it doesn't work out. What if it doesn't work out? Well, not much. There's really not much that goes wrong if it doesn't work out. So in the improv studio, you get very comfortable taking risks because there are literally like no stakes if it doesn't work out. But you can apply that to your real life, and you can start to learn that the fear of the risk is often more than the actual negative consequences are worth. And we just don't realize that. Like, you quit your job. Oh my goodness, if it doesn't work out, Well, oh, that's bad, but it is not the worst thing in the world. Lots of people lose their job and have to start over. It's really often not as devastating a potential consequence as you fear there is.
Well, bringing our conversation full circle, the morbid curiosity, people that have thought about every, oh no, oh, if that happens, interestingly, they're using their creative mind to play out all these possible terrible outcomes. And when life turns out to be not that bad, when the reality turns out to be, oh, okay, well, I can handle this, they actually are relieved because they've thought of everything that could go wrong. So after reading that study, I'm never going to try to talk somebody out of their morbid curiosity again. I'm going to say, tell me more. Tell me
Yeah.
more. It's useful. As long as we
Yeah.
don't get into catastrophizing and therefore paralyze ourselves, it's
Yeah.
okay to play that out. And again, bringing our conversation full circle, that's where stories help us because we
Yeah.
can find a character that's lived through that disappointment if it doesn't go well, a character that was transformed by that disappointment, maybe a character that's destroyed by it, and we don't want to
Yeah.
be destroyed by it. It's all useful if we are willing and able to harvest it into
Yeah.
ourselves.
You do an exercise in storytelling that is taking that middle section of the story spine because of that, because of that, because of that, and just doing that part in order to practice the cause and effect nature of a well-told story. But what you were just saying makes me think, wouldn't that be wonderful to use that exercise in order to help someone explore the worst possible scenario? Like, here is what you're afraid to do. Why are you afraid to do it? Because this might happen. Okay, and if that happens, then what? Then what? Then what? Use because of that to bring it to the worst possible conclusion, perhaps, hopefully, only to discover that the worst possible conclusion is either not really that bad or something that is more a fear in your mind than a practicality.
It's a wonderful exercise. And it could be something that, well, okay, that's so unlikely that my mind is spinning out something. And if we just let it go, let yourself go there, you might, like you said, it might just turn out that I'm not that afraid of that, or it is just so remotely unlikely. But it is a really useful exercise. I'm so honored to have spent this time talking to the originator of the story spine, which was
Thank
one
you.
of the first things I learned in the applied improv space many years ago. I mean, so many years ago. I have it in a notebook and have just applied it in so many different therapeutic settings, in performance settings. So thank you for that. Thank you for being with me here today. And what would you like everybody to know about how they can find you and learn more about your work?
Well, the website is synergytheater.com, synergytheater.com. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, please come to Walnut Creek. We're always performing a full-length improvised play at the Lesher Center for the Arts. Our next one is improvised Dungeons and Dragons in the style of a Lord of the Rings kind of Tolkien story. So please come out and see it. The book is out there right now, available as an ebook, How to Improvise a Full-Length Play, The Art of Spontaneous Theater. And my phone number is in the book. Call me. We could talk about anything. I'll come out and do anything you want me to do, as long as it has something to do with improvisation.
Oh my gosh, call Kenn with your improv questions. And my final thought is like our lives are an improvised play. And it's great to have a guide. Thank you so much, Kenn, for being here today.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode of Improv in Real Life. For more info about our guests and other resources, you can visit our show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're feeling extra generous, write us a review or share with a friend. You can also find us on Instagram at lifestage_inc. And if you want to dive deeper into these concepts, please connect with me on Substack at Jude Treder-Wolff.
To be continued, to be continued, to be continued.
We need each other now more than ever. We need creativity more than ever. I hope these games and ideas inspire you in some way. And if they do, keep it going. I will too. See you next time.